2 weeks away. Okay, if I could get folks to take their seats, we're going to get started here in just about a few seconds. Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Welcome to the City Council regular meeting. Please prepare for the invocation and Pledge of Allegiance.
Our gracious Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing us together this evening. Thank you for the city that we live in. I just pray that as we discuss the business of the city tonight, you would give us wisdom, and Father, may we accomplish your will. All this we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Members Olson.
Good evening, everybody.
Barentine.
Here.
Gillett.
Present.
Martinez. Russell.
Present.
Yates.
Present.
And Mayor Jefferson.
Here.
6 present and 1 absent. The 1 absent being Councilmember Martinez.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 5, this is consideration of minutes of previous session. Under A, we do have minutes from our regular meeting of July 17th, 2017. I'd entertain a motion on 5A at this point.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion or corrections? Seeing none, please vote.
All votes have been cast. The record shows 6 ayes.
Moving us on to 5B, this is the amended minutes from the regular council meeting of July 3rd to reflect the appropriate vote count that we had identified in that meeting but did not quite get back to. I'd entertain a motion on 5B at this point.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion or comments or edits? Seeing none, please vote.
All votes have been cast. Record shows 6 ayes.
Going to move us on to agenda item 6. This is recognition of scheduled public comment. We have several speakers this evening. Our first is Joe Anderson. He's present, will present the Neighborhood USA Best Neighborhood Award Program recognition for the Be a Tool program. Welcome, Mr. Anderson.
Thank you. So last year in September, Inglewood participated along with Golden and Arvada in the Neighborhood Rehab Project. And in a single Saturday, we did 8 home projects with 120 volunteers helping disabled, low-income, and elderly homeowners with their safe, dry, and warm needs, painting projects, yard work, beautified our city, beautified our neighborhood, and got to participate in this along with Golden and Arvada. And this year they're adding Idaho Springs as an additional city. And not only was this a great way for us to, as a city, to just beautify our city and bring some help to some homeowners, but also a great way for citizens of Inglewood to give back to the community by volunteering. We're expecting this year that we'll have 150 to 200 volunteers and hoping to do 12 to 15 projects coming up here on September 9th. But not only is this a great way to give back to the community, it's also the Neighborhood Rehab Project is getting some much-deserved national recognition. So this year at the Neighborhoods USA annual conference in Birmingham, Alabama, the Neighborhood Rehab Project was awarded with 2nd place in neighborhood programs in the area of physical revitalization. So I'm just thankful that Inglewood participated in this along with Golden and Arvada, and all of the projects were funded by the city of Inglewood. All the materials were funded by the city of Inglewood, and then, of course, the churches and other businesses and donors contributed to the whole administration of the whole project. It was fun for me to be a part of it, and I'm just thankful to be in a city that takes part in something like this. So I want to present the Neighborhoods USA Award to the city of Inglewood.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Keck, would you mind receiving this for us?
You participated last year, didn't you?
Okay, I'd like to move us on to our next speaker.
Can we get a picture?
Yes, do we want to look like a picture? Council picture?
Well, go with city manager.
Oh, okay, yeah.
He received the award.
And our smiling faces behind him. Yeah, we're kind of the same from the other side. Thank you again. Move on to our second scheduled public comment as Kathleen Bailey, an Inglewood resident, will present council with an overview. Good evening, Mrs. Bailey.
Good evening. Kathleen Bailey, 4686 South Jason. This year, 2017, Inglewood contracted with Integral Consulting to do a risk assessment, but not the RESRAD that was demanded by the state back in 2012 or the RESRAD that I requested in 2016. Inglewood paid Integral, who advertises they provide defense assistance against residuals-based cancer claims, $111,675. And by using Pro-USA adjusted average data in their RESRAD instead of actual real-time ACC sludge data, and referring to the sludge stockpiling as, quote, a period of negotiation, Integral concludes that Inglewood's historically high radionuclide concentration sludge presented historically low radiation dose health risk. So low, in fact, that Integral's reported risk values were lower than the radiation risks identified in Inglewood's 2003 and 2007 risk assessments, which is, of course, impossible. Unlike any of the sludge prior to 2007, all of the stockpiled sludge years, 2011, 12, 13, 14, and 15, along with 16, were required to be hauled off and disposed of at the state's only hazardous and radioactive approved landfill and buried under 2 feet of dirt. But what got us here? Prior to 2009, when changes occurred in the radionuclide concentrations in the sludge, Inglewood ran updated RESRAD in 2003 and again in 2007 to verify the safety of the sludge. But in 2009, when there was a historic significant increase in the radium levels in the sludge, Inglewood faced over triple the disposal costs if they lost eligibility for municipal landfill disposal, and Inglewood never ran another RESRAD. In 2010, Inglewood argued that the 2009 sludge values were just an anomaly, and the state granted a special variance to dispose of 2009 sludge. In 2011, Inglewood had 2 ACZ 2010 sludge reports, one questionable and one valid. Inglewood chose not to report the second valid 2010 sludge report that showed that radium and uranium levels in the 2010 sludge had exceeded 2009 levels. Unaware of that second report, the state granted another special variance for the 2010 sludge. Then, in their infamous 2012 request to dispose letter for the 2011 sludge, Inglewood also sought approval for their proposed multiple-year disposal periods, 5 years at a time, to replace the required yearly request for approval. Citing the old 2007 risk assessment, Inglewood and CDM knowingly falsely claimed that Inglewood sludge was and will continue to be low level for many years to come, and therefore multiple-year disposal approval was warranted. The state slammed Inglewood's claims in their 2012 response, citing the high radium levels. The state not only denied Inglewood approval to dispose of 2011 sludge, but also declared the 2007 risk assessment not valid and demanded that Inglewood run an updated RESRAD to demonstrate to the state that the millirem per year for radium had not exceeded the 25 millirem per year limit, and Inglewood refused to run that RESRAD. And in total grotesque disregard for the health and safety of their own employees or nearby residents, rather than safely dispose the 2011 sludge at the state's hazardous and radioactive approved landfill, in 2012, Inglewood chose to dump the 2011 sludge on their own small Allen Water Filtration Plant site, ignoring state health and safety codes for yearly disposal, and the stockpiling of hazardous radioactive residuals began on site. 2012 dumped on site. Tragically, in 2012, 3 dedicated employees and 2 employees' wives developed cancer. 2013 dumped on site. A workman's comp claim was brought against Inglewood in 2013 by another dedicated employee who developed cancer in 2013. Now a RESRAD might establish liability, and rather than run a RESRAD, Inglewood chose to question his character, lifestyle, and even the type of cancer. 2014 dumped on site. 2015 dumped on site. Tragically, in 2015, another dedicated employee was diagnosed with cancer. And sadly, in 2013, 15, and 16, dedicated Allen Water Filtration Plant employees died of their cancer. A ResRad was never run. Instead, in 2016, Inglewood sent irrelevant SIRSA data dating back to 2001 to an epidemiologist and gave us the Gibb report. And now in 2017, Inglewood has given us this miraculous $111,675 Inglewood Defense Report that is just as empty and inapplicable as the Gibb report. I declared over a year ago I would
Bailey, please conclude your comments.
Sure.
Thank you, ma'am. Any questions from City Council? Seeing none, I'll thank you, Mrs. Bailey, for coming and speaking this evening. Moving us forward to our third scheduled speaker of the evening is Doug Cohn, an Inglewood resident addressing council regarding historic preservation. Good evening, Mr. Cohn.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. I gave you a handout. How many of you have visited the surplus store? And if you, as you've wandered through there, there's all these crazy rooms, and and you just can wander around all over the place. I kind of wondered what was going on there. So I did a little bit of studying. I talked to you earlier about houses before World War II that you bought it as a kit from Montgomery Ward or Sears, or you could buy the plans if you had your own wood. If you got the wood, or if you got the plans, then you could go to the local lumber yard and pick up the wood that you needed. And as part of the story tonight, the earliest map I found was 1919, but the Inglewood Lumber, Coal, and Planing Company occupied the spot where the surplus store is now. There was a total of 6 buildings along Broadway and Lincoln. They had lumber storage and a shop for planing wood in needed sizes. The Abbott Lumber Company was where the on the east side of Lincoln, where the Swedish rehabilitation place was. They were there from at least from 1919 to 1935. Mayor Abbott owned the Abbott Lumber Company. In 1927, Wise and Ferguson, the lumber company, lumber yard, and planing company took over from Inglewood Lumber, and they built the odd-shaped building that goes along the edge of the creek there, and they connected some of the other buildings together. They owned the store until the early 1950s. 1947, Al Feiner returned to Denver after completing his military service in World War II in the Marine Corps. He decided he wanted to continue to be involved with military goods as he had been during the war. He was a supply sergeant. At the end of the war, vast mountains of military equipment, new and used, was thrown away. When my dad was getting ready to come back from England, he just watched as they dumped jeeps and tanks and whole containers full of stuff in the ocean so they could have space for the guys to return home. Al, the light clicked on. He said, there might be a market for this stuff. And he got together with a couple of other supply sergeants from this neighborhood. The fellow who owns the surplus store over on Alameda, west of the river, in an Old Town Arvada on Old Wadsworth, knew Al during the war, and the three of them got together and said, we can repurpose this stuff. We can resell this stuff that's just being thrown in the ocean right now. So with $500, Al opened his first surplus store. And in 1953, he opened the store on Broadway and took over the Wiseman Ferguson Lumber Company. And he started filling all those parts of the lumber yard where lumber had been stored with his goods and building walls so he could separate the shoes from the coats, from the tents, from all the camping gear. And I think that's kind of cool. What he did, and just a little bit of the history of that building right along the creek there. Lumberyard, now a surplus store. On the back of the paper, there's an early map of what the street looked like in 1933. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cohn. We'll see if council has any questions for you this evening. Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Cohn, for coming and speaking with us. I'd like to move us on to agenda item 7. This is recognition of unscheduled public comment. We do have 3 speakers lined up this evening. Our first one is Shakon Branderland. Is that correct? Here to speak about off-track betting. Welcome. Apologize if I butchered your name. Please start with a correct pronunciation of your name. I apologize, along with your address. Welcome. Sharon, thank you.
Okay, I am here to request the opportunity to open an off-track betting in Inglewood. I worked for Red and Jerry's for 22 years, but we have to relocate because they sold the building. I understand there's a code here that has to be amended. 2 different sections, so that's what I'm requesting. The OTB is regulated by the state quite strictly. We have to have security. All our personnel is licensed. And the revenue, I think, would be quite prevalent to the city of Inglewood. And pretty much what I got to say.
Thank you, ma'am. Let me see if council has any questions for you this evening. I have a quick question. Are you guys looking to relocate? Is that what you're describing?
Yeah, they actually sold the building. So if I want to know another OTB, I have to locate one.
I see. Do you have a particular site in mind in Inglewood or no?
Well, there's a couple that I've looked at, but I can't lease them until I know if you guys...
And basically, you're wanting to operate basically the same style of operations, which is the off-track. That's what you were doing there at that place, location, right? Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we are definitely regulated by the state. They check us once a month. They come through, have to have security. And we never had any major problems as far as crime or anything there. This is more of an older generation that come in. Their wives kick them out in the morning and say, go find some place to go.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes.
Councilmember Barentine.
I'm just concerned that Doug is laughing about that. We should have given Linda that Citizen of the Year award. I would request, since I have had an opportunity to talk to you about this, and I know you were looking for another location in Sheridan where the licensing is already established there, if we could just do it as a council request to get the information on the ordinance that needs to be changed, what changes need to be made to that and what's involved in this, what we would have to do. I don't know if we have a licensing vehicle in place for that or whether that would take a vote if it was considered an additional tax or not. So if we could get some update on that and a little bit more information on the licensing itself. I know that from talking to you, I'd just like it more official, that there are regions that can be licensed. And once this license was given to Red and Jerry's, it would be the only one for a certain area, and that there would be no other competition if she kept the license active. And so I would like to know that as well.
Thank you. Any further questions for our speaker? Thank you. Seeing none, thank you for coming and speaking this evening.
Thank you.
Move us on to our next speaker, which is Nathan Bestie, here to speak about light pole block party. Good evening, Mr. Bestie.
Hello, my name is Nathan Bestie. I'm a Positive Vibes Smoke and Gift Shop on 3398 South Broadway. I also want to talk about a little bit about the light poles. I think regardless of what our opinion is or my opinion is, we need to look at the big picture of what we want Inglewood to look like and the other projects that we plan to do, and then do the poles off of those ideas. I think that if we did the pole, whether we went traditional or modern, we'd be doing every project off of those poles, essentially, versus what we wanted to see Inglewood become. And so I think that we should get the big picture in mind first before we do the light poles. And if that means holding off a little bit, I think it'd be worth it. Same with the block party. I'm very excited that that's going down. That was a personal little vendetta of mine. But at the same time, I would like to see that go down the right way. And if that means putting that off later, too. I've done a lot of shows back in my hometown, Wichita, Kansas, and these are shows that are 100 to 300 people max. But if we're doing a big block party like this, my requirements were at least 2 months promotion, and then the planning would be done before that. So we're coming up on the 2 months already, and we're still trying to figure out some things. So as much as I would still commit to that, if that happened this year, I'd do everything in my power to make that happen and make it the best. I think it'd be more successful maybe late spring, early summer when we had a lot more businesses popping off in the area. It would kind of serve as a grand opening again of Inglewood, if you would, I guess. So more people would come down and see a lot of the Tepuan going in, hopefully One Barrel, and all the other projects that are going on. So that's my 2 cents. So.
Thank you, sir. Let me see if council has any questions for you. Stick around just a second, Mr. Bestie. Councilmember Rolson.
Thank you for coming and giving some input. I have a question. So the last time we talked about some of the changes and the renovations on the 3400 block, I was very concerned that the businesses have some input into that part of the process of picking some of these things, and I was actually scolded that you all really just wanted to get on with it and stop asking all these questions. So what would you think would be the best way to get input on those kinds of things? Because the aesthetics you have to live with.
Oh, yeah. It would take somebody probably going door to door to the businesses, because even emails, it was hard. I saw it at the last minute, so I didn't even get a chance to respond when a lot of people had already been talking about it. And so I do have an opinion on it, but I think the traditional one is a little better. But at the same time, I understand why people would go modern. So it's really hard for me to decide personally what would be better. So we need to figure out the future of Inglewood, I guess, before we figure out the first baby step, I guess, if that makes sense.
To what extent do you think you represent sort of what percentage of the folks that you've talked to in the present?
Well, I've only talked to a small percentage, too. That's the whole thing. So I think a lot of people might not even know about it. And so if we designate maybe a person or two to go, especially to the people that this affects right away, like the businesses that these poles are in front of. I've also heard an option of using some of the lights that have been down here and just putting those on regular poles down there as well. So, that kind of fits into what we're going for, then that fits. So I think, again, a plan, if we're going to do new benches or if we're going to redo some sidewalks or whatever the plan is eventually, that's taken in consideration with these light poles.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Councilmember Barrett.
Did you attend the meeting on Tuesday that they had for the businesses?
What's that?
The Tuesday morning meeting this past
It was at his
Tuesday?
place, right? The mode.
Yeah.
Well, then I guess the answer would be yes, you attended.
Yeah.
So
Most of the people there had kind of the same, they kind of wanted the traditional look too, but again, I was like, I had the same thing, I think both are appropriate if it's the appropriate move in the right direction, I think. So.
Right. And did you know that part of this issue, as Councilmember Olson brought up, came as a result of a presentation that was made by our Public Works Department that said that they did reach out and that there was no feedback. And I guess it wasn't until after that meeting that, I came and talked to a bunch of the businesses, and it became obvious that maybe that communication didn't happen the way that we thought it did. So do you think that there's more consistent
I think the first info I got was from Bob. It was a forwarded email, and so that was the first time that I had ever heard of it as a business. And then we had a little bit of communication, and so that was the first time I had heard about it. So it might take someone just getting someone on the roll, and that's their mission for the next week or so. I think we talked a little bit about it too, just having someone specifically for that job. And it wouldn't take too long. It might take a week, but that would be your designated job to go through and get all the opinions, and then we can actually make an education.
And are those regular meetings that you guys have? That was a regularly scheduled meeting on Tuesday. It just happened to be the issue got brought up.
Yeah, actually,
did anybody from the city attend?
It was supposed to be for a different issue. That just kind of got brought up, and that's what we ended up talking about mostly too. So we were going to do a little social media training that day, and it ended up being more about that, which was fine. We got a lot done about it and got a lot of people's opinions. So that's the whole goal of that meeting in the first place, is to get some connections with the business as well. So it might be a good place to bring these things up. Like I said, it's just a bigger group next time.
Nice job on Final Friday too. If you do a pop-up kitchen here, I bet more people will.
Oh yeah, I think that this Friday is going to be insane.
Further questions for Mr. Bestie at this point?
Yeah.
Seeing none, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bestie. Move on to Elaine Holtz, our final unscheduled public comment of the evening, here to speak about astonishment. Good evening, Mrs. Holtz.
My name is Elaine Holtz. I reside at 333 South Lincoln Street, apartment 706, Englewood, Colorado, 80113. I wish I didn't have to come up here and admonish people all the time. I really hate that role. I thought when my kids were out on their own and raised, it was something that I could just enjoy living the rest of my life and being a happy person. But things haven't changed in my absence. It seems to me that personal problems are brought here to the city council, and it affects attitude. I also noticed another thing, and I'm going to say about the attitude, get over it and grow up. Another thing I noticed is when Kathleen was speaking about a very important issue, some of you had no interest. But let us talk about playing games. All of a sudden, you perk up. I love hearing Doug talk about the history of this city. And I think the reason why he does this, and he does it very well, is to try to impress some of you, 4 of you, to be exact, who are sitting here today, and you know who you are. Because from day one, I know from 2009, when I got involved, I have been talking about the very same thing consistently, and that's about the spending and the revenue. And I have I've made points. I've been called a liar by a previous mayor right from the podium there. And I was using your figures. And I've said to you many times that figures don't lie, but liars can sure figure. And yes, that's true. And they can draw all those pretty pictures on those reports. I look at the numbers. And if any of you do not understand common bookkeeping, I can understand that. Not everybody is very mathematically geared. But you can always ask the proper questions and get the proper information. And ask for relying on employees to make decisions. We didn't vote for them. We voted for you. And you're the ones that have the power to determine what happens in this community. You have still overspent. You have not taken the word. You have not listened. And we are in deep doo-doo. So I'm going to tell you one thing. You have an election coming up. And I'm hoping and praying that the people in Englewood are fed up with the nonsense going on. There's more information going on and more action going on in this city council over who's going to be mayor and mayor pro tem. And that was a fiasco, just like the one about RVs. And I remember a very elderly man who made a very direct statement about the RVs when he said, if you don't like the way we want Englewood run, leave. If you can't do
Mrs. Holtz, could I get you to conclude your comments, ma'am?
Leave the office. Because what you do affects the people out there.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Any questions for Mrs. Holtz? Seeing none, I'll thank you for coming and speaking this evening. I'd like to move us on to council response to public comment. Would anyone like to kick us off? I do have a few comments. Mr. Anderson, thank you for being here. I'm so proud of our neighborhood rehabilitation program. Maybe a little bit of a PSA out there, September 9th, plenty of opportunities to volunteer here in the city of Englewood. Mr. Keck, do you happen to have I know there's several different opportunities that are all kind of going on that day. Do you know any of those?
If you sign up at beatool.org, you can sign up to work and indicate your level of interest in different skills. If you have painting, general contracting, whatever, or no skills whatsoever, just want to come out and help with general cleanup, you certainly can do that. And we certainly do look forward to having lots of people sign up for this year.
Thank you, sir. Mrs. Bailey, thank you for coming and speaking. Unfortunately, I'm not going to have any comments in response to your comments this evening, and support the council in treating this as sort of a pre-litigation issue. Mr. Cohn, thank you for coming and speaking tonight. Love to hear about the Army surplus store. I thought they just opened those because this used Army gear became cool, but now I'm realizing that there was an economic function to that. Being a younger guy, I think of didn't really think of that need, so that was really appreciated. Thank you for that. Sharon, thank you for coming. I think, as Councilmember Barentine pointed out, I think we can get a staff response over to you and give you an idea of kind of what we're up against, and then council can kind of discuss this and come up with a decision about whether or not this is something the council wants to take on from a policy perspective or not. And hopefully the staff can stay in communication with you to let you know so that we can be in good communication. Mr. Bestie, thank you for coming and giving your opinion on the light poles and the block party. I appreciate your involvement and feedback. You and your store have been really great leaders, I think, on the South Broadway corridor, so we appreciate your service there. I did want to point out, I think, that the goal here wasn't to go with a formal vote. I think that the city was just trying to reach out to get a bit of a sample size, to get some feedback. My understanding of some of the feedback regarding the polls was that we only heard from, city staff, so they thought they had only heard from 2 people, both supporting the modern-looking poll, both supporting a more traditional look. Apparently, with some follow-up, one of those people said, actually, we prefer a more contemporary look. I, happened to speak with Chris Vasilis, and he suggested that he had sent us an email into the city staff, but never saw a copy of that, but suggesting that they supported the more modern lights as well. More recently, in this last week, I've heard from them that they've kind of switched positions and are looking for more of a traditional look. My understanding is that I hope that city staff might have a secondary recommendation regarding a slightly more traditional aesthetic. Is that happening this evening?
Mayor, it could. Again, staff we feel like Stretch Armstrong here. We'll do whatever the council would like. We thought there was a process. And then after a decision was made, I was asked to kind of defend the city council's decision, and I guess that caused some consternation as well. But this evening, Mayor, just as you received different lighting standards, there was A through D of potential selection. One of the criteria, obviously, that we were looking for, and a lot of businesses actually requested as well, was a dark sky compliant type light. And some of the historic fixtures weren't dark sky compliant. And of the 5 particular fixtures that are available, if you recall back in your packet, Council, you had, I'll pass this around again, but light C and D on this particular page, they can be dark sky compliant, and they're the more traditional looking fixture. But again, here tonight, Council, we'll do whatever you would like. One of the things that's interesting about this is that we've been kind of beaten and say, move quickly, staff, get this done, and we've tried to do that, and I think Public Works tried to do the best job they could to establish a process, and then we found the process is being unwound. I know there's some head shaking going on by council people, but quite frankly, it's disconcerting for staff to try to keep this project going forward when we feel it's kind of been undermined. But again, we're here tonight to listen. We'll do whatever the council would like, but we heard very clearly from council that you wanted the installation done this year, and we were on target to do that, but we still could. You can make your decision, council, as to what fixture you would like, and we'll go from there.
But you're saying that both C and D, which have those more traditional looks, neither of those are dark sky compliant. Do either of those have LED fixture options? Are you aware?
They are. C and D are dark sky compliant, can be made, and they are LEDs.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that information. Hopefully, council, perhaps at member choice or even now with this feedback, we can start to come to some consensus on this. I would like to see this move forward. Again, given the feedback that I've received, my impression, again, it's not a formalized vote, is that more of the folks on that block are looking for, something that has more of a traditional theme to it. And so, I'm happy to kind of reevaluate this and discuss this, after getting additional feedback from the businesses on that block. But again, I think if our intention is to really go with a formal vote, I think when you look at the number of businesses that are on that block, as well as the businesses that operate those real estate properties, you're looking at a very large number of people to get into a room and try to get them to agree. And I don't think we're ever on aesthetic, something like this, going to get 100% buy-in. It's kind of such a subjective kind of thing that, some people are going to prefer traditional and some people are going to prefer more contemporary. Elaine, thank you for your comments. I appreciate you being here. I know it's been a while. I appreciated your comments, particularly regarding spending and expenditures. I will point out, I think we have made some progress in that regard. Of course, we're not out of the woods yet with so many long-term capital needs. But, I will point out that 2016, I believe, was the first year of a past surplus budget since, I believe, the 1990s. So I feel like we have made some progress in that regard, but I appreciate your comments, and I know that we're not out of the woods yet and need to be very conscious of that moving forward. Councilmember Barentine.
As for the lighting, I apologize to the businesses on the 3400 block because I relied on the information that was being brought forward by our Public Works Department that they had sufficiently talked to the businesses. It wasn't until after that meeting, realizing that the businesses want to move forward too, that you guys are a very outspoken group and have been very very proactive in things, and so I took it upon myself to go down and talk to those businesses to see if the information was accurate. At the last study session, all we were given was the one choice. That's all we discussed. That's all we were told. So these 4 that are being passed around now were not even discussed on. It became very apparent to me in an evening of going around talking to the businesses that businesses who had chimed in were maybe not being represented or other people were being left out. And so I know that it was decided to go ahead and discuss it at that Tuesday meeting. I think a couple of days and a little bit of footwork really doesn't hurt to go ahead and make sure that we're solid with our businesses and their buy-in for an expenditure like this that we're expecting to last 20 or 30 years, hopefully. Maybe it'll only last 16 like the last one. I don't know. But that's the buy-in, and you guys have been very vocal and very active, and I will not make that mistake again. I will make sure to back it up and see if I could get a little hands-on with the businesses like I did this last time. I know that you guys had the meeting, and I think that it's reasonable to try and make sure that we are keeping with the theme. We have the letter from Paul also, who was unable to be here, and whether it's one block is always going to be a small sample of things, but it does, like you had informed us, it's going to affect the rest of the design as we go down to the other blocks in downtown. We're not going to have one block look one way and another block look another. So those businesses, I try to communicate with some of them because it will affect them as we keep doing this renovation going down. So in the future, I will not rely as heavily on staff, and I apologize for any miscommunication that caused. Elaine, I'm glad she left, but I'm glad that she's back. I know that she's been ill, and always good to see her back in here. The betting, I hope that we get the information, and I know that Red and Jerry's was there for a long time. It'd be interesting just to see what all that information looks like, but thanks for bringing it forward to us. And that was all I had.
Thank you. Councilmember Russell?
Yes, as always, I would like to thank everyone for coming out to address council, because unless we hear from you, we don't know what needs to be taken care of. And Nathan, I want to thank you for coming out tonight. I want to thank you for all that you're doing to encourage activity in this city. And I did attend the meeting on Tuesday morning. My concern was not so much that staff hadn't done their job. I do believe that they did. My concern was that the businesses, only a couple of people had responded to the email, and I shared with the just over a handful of people that were at the meeting on Tuesday morning that my personal feeling in what happened was that the businesses were too busy and perhaps it didn't make any difference. And it was shared with me that, yes, the answer is the businesses are busy. They have a lot on their plate. And they do care because it is going to impact what's going on down there. A couple of the comments that I heard was we've chosen historical banners. We are touting the 3400 block as our historical district, and then we choose modern lighting. And I believe that's partly why Nathan came with the option. We need to get the big picture. If we're going to present a historical district, then we need to have more historical looking lighting. And I'm not asking staff to go out and knock on every door. We know that our staff does not have time, but as Councilmember Olson shared at that first meeting, it's important for the businesses to be brought into this. And so I believe that it's council's responsibility to go out and find out what the business community wants and be engaged and share that with staff. I believe that we are supposed to help one another. And there was no council member that called a business meeting. I attended a meeting that was already happening because I wanted to find out input from what was going on. Thank you for coming, Nathan. I appreciate it. And Paul's email to us backs up a lot of what I've just shared. And so, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Yates?
I'd like to say to Doug, I'm going to share this little story about the surplus store to a friend of mine that's his career, dealing with World War II military Jeeps and surplus and stuff. He was telling me that that is one of the stores that people come from all over the country to take a look at because it's one of the few that's left. In regards to the lighting, I have to say that I've talked to quite a few of the business owners over there, and once there was an explanation of a bigger picture other than just here's a light pole, but understanding that these particular poles will give us some flexibility. They're going to be of a dark color, so they're going to blend into the scene a lot more than if it was a chrome pole. And the idea behind this is that we like to do the lighting for the holidays. But the cost of stringing lights and changing colors and all of that stuff is really high. And frankly, we're talking about budget tonight. It's not in the budget to do these sort of things. With this type of lighting, it gives us the ability to change these colors, change themes, and literally we are able to celebrate more holidays or create a theme event. They're also modular in design, which if we ever chose to, let's say, we want to do for some of us that are old enough to remember this, along these streets where you have holiday music playing, this lighting can be modified for speakers to play that type of music. And it's a simple process. It's a section where they screw off the top, they screw the new one on, and you're up and running. Or if we need traffic cameras in order to handle a traffic situation, same thing goes. They're completely modular, where the other types of designs, you get a light. That's all you get. Where this will help us manage that whole area in the future and create different themes throughout the year. So once I explained that these are some of the other benefits to this lighting, the business owners that were somewhat concerned about going with a modern theme, they agreed with me that this would bring a lot more activity to the area versus just a decorative light post. So I just figured I had to express that out for the general public since we were hearing so much about the negative side here. Thank you.
Councilmember Olson.
Thank you, and thank you, Councilmember Yates, because I think that's the kind of information I was hoping could be more clearly communicated to the businesses in the past. I'm not in favor of 7 members going down the business section of 2 blocks and all of us getting our different perspectives. I think that's worked really against us. I've actually heard from a couple of business owners who get nervous when some of us come around because they think either we're trying to find some way to demonstrate something another council member hasn't done right, or to discredit our staff, which I think has happened in this process, and that is unfortunate. I think our staff have worked at it, and we need to come up with a better process for how to get, I mean, goodness gracious, it's a very small amount of blocks to get their information, and we really need you all to speak to it. If it's walking down the street for something like this, then we got to organize ourselves so we don't shoot ourselves in the foot in the process of doing that. But it seems to me like there's a huge amount of money being invested there. I want to figure out what can we do to make sure we get a really comprehensive view from these businesses. We're investing a lot. We want it to be right. We're not trying to do something to circumvent that. We want it to be helpful. And a couple businesses that I've talked to, they realize that. They just know it's a complicated group of people to work with. But that kind of information, I wonder if there's some way to get that out, and if there's your normal Tuesday meeting, if the next one could be devoted to that to get as many people there as possible. I don't know. I think our staff are getting caught in the middle on this in a strange way. And for us to talk at a council meeting saying, that some people have heard that that's what they just want us to move on, and when that isn't really totally the case, that really concerns me. We're sending very mixed messages. Bottom line, though, is I really do want to see us get lights that are conducive to the future and that don't lock us into a style. What's considered historical is a different history than mid-century modern, to be honest. It looks more like 20s and 30s, not 50s. So I'm a little concerned about that as well. And then the light for the what do you call it, the compatibility with the night light. And down-facing is, I mean, I think you've probably seen current studies that have come out. And this will be important for Doug because he's concerned about bees, right? Pollinators, night light really does impact pollinators and depletes it quite a bit for a community. So if we're trying to work on that, we want to make sure that that part of this is figured out too. So I don't know what to say. I just would like to say, in terms of what do we do next, we have to figure this out. And I don't know if it's city manager, if you can give us some ideas of what you need from us at this point, if we just move ahead and let you just do it, or...
Council, I think at this point in time, I think what we'd like to hear is some consensus from council. If you want to see us have a Tuesday morning meeting with the merchants of downtown Inglewood, that's fantastic. But it would be nice if all those merchants then could be present, at one point in time to be able to gather the group's feelings. But this isn't about feelings. I think Nathan hit the nail on the head too. He's like, pick a fixture, it's going to work. And one of the things that I think maybe was lost with the city council in the initial discussion, and maybe we didn't bring this forward enough as staff, but we did an analysis of lighting. And if you go up to Denver, they have historic fixtures. And I think we heard council say, we don't want to look like Denver, and we said, fine. And that's why you got the fixture that you got, as opposed to a historic fixture, which, again, in your packet from the meeting two weeks ago, we showed the South Broadway Antique Row and South Broadway lighting from Denver. That was in your packet.
Indeed it was.
Yeah, so we just want to have consensus from you to give us direction, hear from the business community, and pay deference to them as well for what they would like to see, and then cut us loose, because we can't have 1 week beating us with a whip to say, get this project done, and then say, whoop, stop, because we're dealing with vendors, we're having to do a bid process and a selection, and again, we want to do what's right. We want to follow a process, and we want to feel like, we've got the support. We're not going to, 2 weeks later be undermined by a different decision. That's what I'm asking for.
So do we do that now, or do we pick it up at the end?
At member choice and try to gain some consensus so that staff can move forward this week. Anything else, Councilmember Olson?
No, that's
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, I was going to reiterate that a lot of the same things Ms. Olson was saying on there. When we were presented this, we were presented the reasons for the choice and the benefits and the long-term benefits and how these poles could handle the new flags that we're wanting to put on, and how it would take us into future marketing and a future direction for that area. And also the poles we have there now, because they were pretty, they didn't last very long. They rotted. We didn't want to get into that situation again. There was a lot of discussion about this that I hope the businesses would hear as well, not just that we're trying to ram something down their throat, but one of the things that I've never felt comfortable as council is that we micromanage the city manager's office, or we micromanage staff. We need to give them a direction and trust their direction, or we need to say we don't trust them at all. So I personally want to give the city manager and staff the say, do what's best and the right thing. And if we have a standard and the businesses want something different, then they can pay for the difference. They can collect their money together, and they can make a better idea. The bid tried to do that a few years ago. We couldn't even get the bid people to agree on things. So that's a concern of mine on that. But I want to make sure that our poles last a long time. Our poles don't shoot light upward. That our poles are LED. That the lights can change. That they can be multi-used. And the biggest thing that interests me most, for the most part of the year, those lights come on when those businesses are closed. It doesn't even affect their businesses a large part of the year. And I know there's times of the year that does, and hopefully we'll have pretty lights on them, and it'll attract things. But I hope we just move this forward and let staff do what they need to do. And if staff feels that they'd like to get some input, or at least I think what would be helpful, in my opinion, is explain to staff why these poles are the optimal, and a lot of us here are concerned about city spending, and these were also some of the least cost of the poles that we could have chose. So I don't want to micromanage this. The staff knows what's important to council and what we want, and I'm all for speaking with businesses and at least let them know why we're going this direction. I think that'd be good, but I just want to move this forward and get it done. I think we're spending more time on this than I think is even necessary tonight. So, but that's it. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. No further comments. I'm going to move us on to agenda item 8. This is communications, proclamations, and appointments. Under 8A, we have 2017 GFOA Distinguished Budget Presentation Award. This is the Government Finance Officer Association's Distinguished Budget Presentation Award, which has been presented to the City of Inglewood.
Do you have a motion first?
Yes, please.
I move to accept.
Second.
Is that what we want here? Is that what
Don't we have to have a
is
motion?
this just a
to accept
presentation or is it a motion to accept?
Right.
Okay. Okay. Now, fair enough. We got the motion and second on the table. We'll go to the presentation and then vote on it.
Perfect. So I'm very proud that we've been awarded the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award from the Government Finance Officers Association for our 2017 budget presentation. We fondly call it our budget package or our budget book. And this is the 17th consecutive year that we've been awarded this presentation or this award. It's the highest form of recognition in government budgeting, and it's based on guidelines to assess how well the entity's budget serves as a policy document, a financial plan, an operations guide, and a communications device. It requires excellence in the area of introduction and overview, financial structure, policy, and process, financial summaries, capital and debt, departmental information, and document criteria such as statistical and supplemental data. There are over 1,600 participants in the program for 2017, and we're very proud to be one of them because this is a very small community in the government areas where they do produce a budget book. And we're honored to be a recipient and very proud to be able to present this award to the city.
Thank you. Any questions from council for staff? Councilmember Barentine.
I went on the website, and they only have us listed for 15 years, so you might want them to correct that if we actually have had it for 17.
Okay, well, actually...
I mean, at least for this level of award.
Okay.
I didn't see us on the other ones, but it just said 15, so if you'd correct that.
Will do.
You?
Give us credit for the other 2 years.
Absolutely.
Mr. Keck, I don't know if you want to come down to receive another award this evening. Come on down, sir. Thinking this through, I don't feel like I need a motion or a second to receive an award. Can I just let that motion and second just die, or do we want to retract it? Great. I'm just going to move us past it.
Remove my motion.
Yeah, if you don't mind. Thank you. I see no reason for us to open up that precedent. Congratulations, city staff, on a job well done, 17 years in a row, something to be very proud of. Going to move us on to 8B. This is the Big Brothers Big Sisters of Colorado Week proclamation. I'd entertain a motion on 8B.
So moved.
Thank you. Thank you. We have a first and a second. Before I read it into the record, we will vote first. Any comments or questions regarding this issue? Seeing none, please vote.
All votes have been cast. The record shows 6 ayes.
Thank you. I'd like to at this time read this proclamation into the record. Whereas Big Brothers Big Sisters of Colorado has been providing children facing adversity with strong, enduring, and professionally supported one-to-one relationships that change their lives for the better since 1918. And whereas Big Brothers Big Sisters of Colorado's unique approach to each relationship requires professional training, guidance, and support to help our bigs inspire real social, emotional, and academic growth in their littles. And whereas this change is measured through the Youth Outcomes Survey, a tool that was developed and adopted by the national organization along with industry leaders to measure real-time effectiveness of the programs. And whereas the results of the survey substantiate that Big Brothers Big Sisters' mentoring programs have proven positive academic, socio-emotional, and behavior outcomes for youth in areas linked to high school graduation, avoidance of juvenile delinquency, and college or job readiness. And whereas our youth hold America's future in their hands, and Big Brothers Big Sisters of Colorado is leading the way. In 2017, the organization will support more than 2,000 mentoring relationships with bigs and littles matched. And whereas Big Brothers Big Sisters of Colorado is calling on all Coloradans to support them in expanding their one-to-one mentoring model that creates powerful, life-changing relationships for the littles and bigs, as well as allows all children to have an opportunity to achieve success in life. Now, therefore, I, Joe Jefferson, Mayor of the City of Inglewood, Colorado, hereby proclaim July 17th to July 23rd, 2017 as Big Brothers Big Sisters of Colorado Week in the City of Inglewood. Congratulations to Big Brothers and Big Sisters. We are proud to be the new home of their organization. Happy to pass this along. I did get an opportunity to go speak with their organization during this week where they were ramping up efforts. We were told them that we would deliver a copy of this to their office. Any further comments on this issue? Councilmember Olson.
This is a great organization. I think we all know that. I have a question. I don't know if we know the answer to, if we have any idea how many bigs we have volunteering out of our city and how many littles we have serving. Do you know if we can find that out?
I'm happy to try to get that answer.
That'd be good to know.
Thank you. Let's move on to agenda item 9. This is the consent agenda items. I'd entertain a motion on the consent agenda.
Mayor, move to approve consent agenda item 9A1 and 2 and 9C1.
Thank you. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion on these items? Councilmember Russell.
I would like to pull 9A2.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, that leaves us with 9A1 and 9C1 for approval. Seeing no comments, please vote on the approval of those consent agenda items.
All votes have been cast. The record shows 6 ayes.
Thank you. I'd like to bring us back to 9.2. This is Council Bill 49, Community Development Block Grant Program, IGA. Staff recommends the council approve a bill for an ordinance authorizing the execution of an intergovernmental subgrantee agreement for the 2017 Arapahoe County Community Development Block Grants Program between the Arapahoe Board of County Commissioners and the City of Inglewood. Our staff source is our senior planner, Harold Stitt. Good evening, Mr. Stitt. Given that this is a consent agenda item, we will skip a staff presentation and go directly to council member questions for staff regarding Council Bill 49. Councilmember Russell.
Down where it says $115,000 for the energy efficient Inglewood E3 project to provide matching grants to 12 low to moderate income homeowners for energy efficiency interior and exterior home improvements. And I actually believe in the ordinance, it talks about energy efficient Inglewood has been categorized as a housing rehabilitation activity. Who authorized it as a rehab activity?
That is a federal government designation for the program.
Okay, and did they just do that recently?
No, it's been categorized under the housing rehab category since we began the EQ program 10 plus years ago.
Okay, so 10 plus years ago. Then the next question that I have is under the financial implications. It talks about community development employees administer the project, and it's their salaries and benefits are part of the city's contribution. But then it goes on to say the city will utilize a portion of the community development block grant funding from the project, estimated $4,000, to partially offset the costs of those salaries and benefits. So either we donate it or we don't.
Well, we donate most of our time, but we do get to take some overhead costs out of the grant, and that's what that $4,000 represents.
Okay, and so when the grant money comes in, what fund does it go into?
It goes into the Fund 46, which is a housing rehab fund. It's a separate fund.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Barentine.
So that issue came up before at the study session about the Housing Rehabilitation Fund. So hopefully the Kathy Renko, maybe she could get into more detail, because I didn't see that piece in there. I mean, that fund is got only a $2,000 revenue thing coming in, and so we needed to figure out. We've already requested a little bit more information on what's coming in and out of that fund. On this document has, on the contract, references, I think, maybe 4 different times the, let's see here, the Exhibit A, which is the scope of services that it should be attached. And there's, I think, 3 or 4 different sections where it says that it is subject to the performance standards established in Exhibit A, and yet Exhibit A was not provided to us to go ahead and understand exactly what we were agreeing to. So I would actually like to postpone this until we can go ahead and have all of the information that's referenced in the contract that we're voting on.
Thank you. Any further questions for staff at this time? I'd like to entertain a motion on Council Bill 49.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Further discussion on this item? Councilmember Russell?
I still believe.
Sorry, go to Councilmember Russell. I'll come right back to you.
I would like to move that we table this until we get Exhibit A, the scope of services in this agreement.
Okay.
A second.
Here, a separate motion to table, as well as a motion to approve. I suppose I should take the motion to table first. Councilmember Yates comments now on, actually, if you guys don't mind, I'm going to clear the request to speak and ask that anybody who wants to chime in on this specific motion to table. Councilmember Yates.
This question is for our city attorney. You did review the contract on this, and it's not opening us up for any unusual activities.
I had my deputy review this last week because I was out of town for the week. There's a couple other things that I pulled and reviewed, but I did not pull and review this one.
Is there any concern for us to be taking a second look at it? I know you didn't read it. But
No, is the question, is there any concern to table it?
yeah, I mean, is there any concern that we should table this?
It always bothers me when we miss an attachment.
Okay.
And honestly, if I'm pressed to have an answer, if we missed an attachment, I think it's okay to table it.
I would be supporting a table on this.
Thank you. Councilmember Barrington.
I appreciate that. I share your concern. Anytime that I'm being asked to vote on or approve something that I don't have the entirety of that document, and there are severe penalties and issues that are being brought up that are being referenced to that, I appreciate your concern about that. So I'll be favoring tabling it until we know what we're voting on.
Mr. Stitt, no issue from your perspective of waiting a couple of weeks on approving an IGA with this to receive this funding for E3?
I think that'll be fine.
Thank you, sir. Okay, we have a motion and a second. No further comments on the motion to table? Then please vote.
All votes have been cast. The record shows 6 ayes.
Thank you. I'm going to move us on to agenda item 10. This is public hearing items. We do have one. This is a public hearing for the adoption of the International Fire Code and amendments. Public hearing on adopting a bill for ordinance amending Title 8, Chapter 2, Article 3 of the Inglewood Municipal Code 2000 pertaining to the International Fire Code. Our staff source is Fire Marshal Laura Herbland.
Mr. Mayor, move we open the public hearing.
Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you. Councilmember Olson. Thank you. Any comments before we open this? I do know we have no speakers signed up, so it probably will simply be a staff report. Please vote on the opening of the public hearing.
Votes have been cast. The record shows 6 ayes.
Welcome. Good evening.
Good evening. Just to, excuse me?
Raise your right
Hold your right hand up.
It's new to me. I do. Laura Herblin. Good evening. And I apologize, this is my first time for doing a public hearing. I did cover the 2015 adoption of the International Fire Code with amendments, first beginning a study session on July 15th, 2015, and returning on April 3rd, July 15th, May 8th, and July 3rd of 2017, where the request to have a public hearing was suggested by council.
Thank you. Questions for staff? Councilmember Yates.
Okay, I have a couple of questions here. I noticed on most, well, not virtually, everything was asking for 2 sets of engineered plans to be submitted. As we move forward with our computer systems and everything goes more electronic, is that something that will be in the works that we'll be able to to do?
Absolutely. Most electronic capability has the wet stamp capability so that you can see that it's authentic signature that we have on file. Once we get to the electronic submittal, that takes care of itself.
Okay. This is in regards to N103.9. It's in reference to the UL 300 systems. The last requirement, number 8, says shop drawings signed by a professional engineer licensed by the state of Colorado.
Member Yates, would you tell us what page you're on, just so we can follow?
Well, hopefully I'm looking at the same document, but page 220.
Thank you, sir.
Now the reason I'm asking this is on UL 300s, these are pre-engineered systems. And for the general public who may not be aware of what an engineered system is versus a pre-engineered system, engineered systems is where you have a bunch of raw parts, you have an engineer figure out how it all goes together, and you build it. A pre-engineered system is tested, designed by the manufacturer. And what the manufacturer says, okay, if you have a gallon and a half of wet agent, you have a total of like 10 flow points. I'm just throwing numbers out there. So what you then do is you look at that kitchen arrangement. Oh, I probably should tell everybody what a UL 300 is. It's for kitchen hood systems to put fires out in a commercial kitchen. So you look at the equipment that's under that hood, and you say, if it's a griddle, you need 2 flow points. And you simply add these things up. If you exceed a certain amount of flow points, you add more agent, or you may have to add another unit, control head. Now, in all of the jurisdictions that I have dealt with this type of product, if you engineered or if you put the system together the way the manufacturer tells you to do it, because they've done all the testing and all of the engineering, you're fine. Now, each jurisdiction has a way that they would like to see that design and that drawing. Denver's amendment here, at least the way I read it, okay, and tell me if I'm wrong on this, is that you're requiring a state of Colorado licensed engineer to draw this thing out, which we're adding another level of well, first of all, am I reading that correct?
Partially.
Okay.
The state of Colorado, as you know, does have certification for all fire suppression sprinkler system contractors. Commercial kitchen hoods kind of fall on with 1 foot on side of each line. So they are considered fire suppression systems, but they're not covered under the state. So most jurisdictions have their own, as he said, regulations on how you install them and your own level of regulation to make sure they're installed correctly. So yes, partially to that.
Okay. So here's a potential problem I see with this, is that the engineers I've dealt with on this, they will specify a specific brand name. If you're using any other brand name other than, I'll throw one out there like Ansel, it's difficult to find an engineer that will actually look in the manual and say, yes, you did this all correctly. It also adds more cost to our community. And here again, the system has been engineered, tested, and stamped approved as long as you follow these certain criteria. And part of a plan submittal, and I know you know all of this, Laura, a lot of this is for the community.
Hopefully it involves a question here.
Well,
yes.
It does.
Because I can comment on that. People do reuse and resell commercial kitchen hood systems because of the cost associated. So rather than me being the expert on behalf of the city on all these different types of commercial kitchen hoods, I asked that a professional engineer sign off on, and most of the time we see used systems, saying that this system from 1993 is designed for use on Broadway today. And I'm putting that onus on them to get their professional engineer to do that instead of me making those judgment calls. It's a level of insurance, basically.
Let me throw this out here, is that I understand the concern with some other units and them being reused because I've had to put things back together. There is a whole process for doing that, and it's part of the inspection process you use every 6 years, so on. And it doesn't really vary that much from, well, I got to be careful in how I say this because there is a system they don't use anymore. But the additional cost and the layer of complexity for our community is higher. We're also creating a market where a specific brand is preferred over another just simply because the engineers have been trained in that particular one. Now, in order to install these systems, you have to go through training and be certified for this. So it isn't like the installer has never touched these things before, and along with the liability and the insurances that go along with that. And you have to prove all of that. So I still want to clarify, why do we need this on new systems? I can see maybe your point on the old systems, but on new systems where information is readily available?
Again, this is not a retroactive code. This is for new systems. If someone chooses to use a used system, I'm asking that it be an engineer take a look at it and make sure that, you know, if it was used for 20 years, were things altered in that system? Is it still code compliant? Does it still provide the level of coverage that they're looking for? I'm asking for those basic things to be covered in these new systems, you know, just as to cover our bases, basically. And again, you know, I wouldn't be here in the capacity to look at codes and look at licensing and look in plan review if everyone did installations correctly. It's a regulatory piece and it's a requirement, you know, because not everyone does it the right way, honestly. So looking at used systems, you see it the same thing with paint booths. You have more risk associated with used booths and commercial kitchen hood systems where you don't know where they came from and how they've been used and abused and serviced and maintained.
Yeah, I can understand your point with paint booths because they are considerably more complicated, and they're not necessarily pre-engineered because each booth is designed somewhat differently. They have a bottom draft, updraft, you know, a variety of ways, and that isn't necessarily covered real well. But on the kitchen hood systems, which is something that the equipment itself is anywhere from $2,500 to $3,500 for a basic system. Here we throw another $500 on top of that, and we're creating it. We're making a situation more difficult when the people installing are already licensed, they've already been trained, and you have to provide that documentation. I'm assuming at least you're asking for it, the documentation when those plans are submitted, that these are qualified installers.
Because they're not covered by the state, like a fire suppression system installer would be, or an inspector covered by the state. All they have to do is come in and get a license with the city. I mean, there are no checks and balances, and that's why I'm putting those checks and balances in place, because anybody can install them.
Yeah, well, I will kind of...
In Inglewood, they can. So that's why I have this layer in there to make sure that they're installing
any licensed fire contractor, or are you just saying any Joe Schmo?
Licensed fire contractor.
Okay. Every other jurisdiction, when I submit a set of plans, you submit it with the technical data, you submit it with your license, you submit it that you're a qualified, trained individual for installing it, and that you're following the pre-engineered. Now, if these were engineered systems, I definitely agree with you. But these are pre-engineered. The work's already been done. All you have to do is follow the instructions. With that still in mind, I mean, are you still saying that we need to add another layer of cost to the community?
I'm not saying it's a layer of cost. If you're opening a restaurant today and you have no history, you can ask any of these council members who don't have your fire suppression background. If you're opening a kitchen and you're not an expert on those systems, and someone's trying to sell you a used one that was, you know, purchased 15 years ago in a different city, it would behoove you to do your research and to have an engineer come in who specializes in those systems to tell you, yes, this is designed exactly what you're looking for. It has another good lifespan of 10, 15 years, or no, this isn't really what you're looking for. I can't design those systems for the public. They can come in and I can tell them where to look and who to hire, but I can't design them for them. So this is making sure that our business owners are protected. And yes, there's a cost incurred, just like with any other business that has to hire an architect or an engineer just to do a change in use. It's a checks and balances to make sure that they're getting a good product and a safe product, and it's code compliant without me engineering and designing it for them.
But first of all, I hope that was a slip of the tongue that you're recommending installers. I hope you're not doing
No,
that.
I said
We
I
have
cannot.
a point of order.
But-
I mean, we're arguing.
But
Excuse me, Mr. Yates, if you would mind for a moment, I do have a point of order to address. Councilmember Barentine.
I think she's been asked and answered the question several times. I'm not sure that, I mean, if that's going to impact the vote, that's one thing, but I'm not sure we're debating with her.
Yeah, Councilmember Yates,
Fair enough.
I'm happy to continue on with questions, but if you could get to the questions, I do worry that you start to, it starts to look like a debate, and we'll have plenty of opportunity to debate this issue at our next meeting.
this is a relatively difficult subject from the standpoint that besides Laura and myself, we're probably the only ones that understand nuances to it. So there's a lot of education to the public. I think I've probably made my point that I feel that this particular ordinance is out of line and not within the mainstream of designs, even in places like Illinois where this is highly regulated.
Fair enough. I just feel like those comments would be more appropriate after we close the public hearing.
Okay.
That way,
Well,
you're not creating the
Fair enough.
testimony in my mind.
Fair enough.
Thank you, sir. Further questions for staff at this time?
May I move to close the session?
Second it?
Thank you. Any comments before we close the public hearing here? I did have no members of the public signed up this evening, either opposing or favoring the adoption of the International Fire Code. Is there anyone here who came with the intention of speaking on this issue? Seeing none, I have a motion and a second to close the hearing. Without any further comment, please vote.
All votes have been cast. The record shows 6 ayes.
Thank you, ma'am. Move on to agenda item 11. This is ordinance resolutions and motions. Under 11C1, we have a contract for service center roof replacement. Staff recommends council approve by motion contract CFC 1718 to Garland DBS Inc. in the amount of $271,806 to replace the roof of the main building at the service center. Our staff sources are facilities, service, and maintenance manager, Dan Long. Good evening, Mr. Long.
Mayor, good evening, council. This is, to me, kind of straightforward. We've got a roof that acts more like a sieve. You have a picture in your packet that shows the main stairwell with a bunch of buckets. I tried to put a video in the packet that would add the sound to that, and
We can think that one up.
it's pretty noisy. We actually do close that stairwell at times during some rain events and snow events. I guess I'm here to answer questions at that point.
Thank you. Questions for staff from council? Councilmember Russell.
Was this included in the budget for this year?
From everything I can see from my predecessors, yes, it was.
Okay, and then I really do appreciate the breakdown in the fund status because we had asked for that, and I thank you very much for that. Is it still possible to get the budget page that this is coming out of put in the packet in the future?
I don't see why not.
Well, or now. I mean,
Okay.
it exists. So if we could just get that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions from council? Seeing none, entertain a motion.
Second.
Thank you. Further comments on 11C1? Seeing none, please vote.
All votes have been cast. The record shows 6 ayes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to move us on to members' choice. We do have the issue of the light poles to discuss a bit, so anybody who'd like to kick us off, please do include your comments perhaps about how you'd like to see us perhaps move forward. From my perspective, I feel like we have a couple of options. We've got one of creating a new consensus this evening on a poll, or at least a style of poll to give direction to the staff, and then that information could then be disseminated out to the local business community, and we could feel out the feedback we got on that. I feel like the second alternative is to pump the brakes on this project a little bit on the light pole portion of it, and perhaps have a public meeting and direct staff to do some outreach and preparation for that. Mayor Pro Tem.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we just continue moving forward. Let staff go ahead and, staff's already given us a report. We've already have the information on why the decision was made. We already have members of the city moving forward on that. We just, I think what we could do is maybe explain to the businesses why these poles were chosen and what the future plans for them are, and just move it forward. And that's all I have tonight.
Thank you. Councilmember Yates, you can go next.
I would be in favor to move forward. I kind of feel this situation has been, let's say, escalated due to selective information being given to the business district. But for what we're trying to accomplish, they fit in, they hide, since they're just a black stick, we're worried about visual clutter. This will reduce the amount of visual clutter, still give us the lighting that we need. It gives us the abilities to address new issues in the future. It gives us the ability, if we have God forbid, but we've got an area that's a little dark where crime can happen, it's easy enough to modify these poles to shine light into those areas. It gives us the ability for the audio, gives us the ability to create more of a festive type of event for more events throughout the year instead of just Christmas and the holidays. And it just all the way around, I think it kind of fits into it. Because that, the 3400 block, and I realize this isn't just for that block, but for that block where we've had the discussions that we're a little concerned about how much we're shoving into there. And if we're going to have architecture and we're going to have art and we're going to have all these signs and then we're going to have ornamental light fixtures and everything else, something needs to give. And this would help pull that back and give us that necessary flexibility for success on that block.
Thank you. Any further comments? Councilmember Rolson? Councilmember Rolson?
I didn't, my light's not on.
Oh, this is member choice. Do you have any member choice?
No, okay. I thought we were having a conversation about this.
Oh, I thought it was lights, but...
I thought we were talking about lights right now.
Fair enough, Councilmember Barentine. I'll come back to you for member choice then.
Yeah, we weren't doing, he didn't do members' choice.
I know that the lights
I didn't think he had anything additional for member choice. That was mine.
I thought you were asking me about the lights.
Fair enough. Let's do the lights and then we'll go back
else.
to member choice. Fair enough. Thank you for that.
No, we're talking about the lights and then, okay, still. If further explanation, like Councilmember Yates said, and wanting to make sure that we have buy-in, which Councilmember Olson wanted, then I don't think having one meeting with the businesses so that they have buy-in on this, that if it's, as Councilmember Yates claims, is that they will understand as soon as they see the benefits of these fixtures, then what's one meeting on a Tuesday to make sure that the businesses are all called together and have some respect for them to just go ahead and make sure that you get that information and lessen the confusion. I think that would be in the best interest of everybody. The lights haven't been ordered. I talked to Dave Henderson, I think last week, and he said it was going to be at least 2 weeks before they did it. We certainly have time. It's not going to interfere with anything. And if a little bit of communication is going to sell them on a different fixture and give them the respect for that outreach like Councilmember Olson is looking for, then let's make that happen.
Thank you. Councilmember Rolson?
I just want to clarify that in no way did I feel like the staff disrespected our business owners downtown. I just want to make sure, Manager Keck, that you and your staff know that. To me, this is all about whether or not we've pushed hard enough for them to hear what we need to hear from them. And obviously, they didn't step up when the emails came. And my experience on the bid is that was always the case. That's why I've asked every single time we've talked about this, what are the business saying? And if you remember the last time, I basically got shut down for even asking that. And so I have no problem waiting another week either. If anything, to continue to show to them that the city absolutely does want to always hear from them, will always keep asking, and even will go the extra mile or two to ask them. And so I would like to see us wait and just do one more due diligence And bless your staff for hanging in there with this. There's nothing that they did wrong in this. I think this process shows a little bit of our own dysfunction here, so it's not your doing.
Thank you. Do the folks who've spoken so far support meeting with the business community, recommending the contemporary lights and giving an explanation as to why that was the staff recommendation, and if there's, a consensus of feedback that they don't like that even after hearing the rationale, that we get some statistical data on what the consensus is?
Was that an actual question?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. You stated in
I'll
a
ask
very
it again.
short, you're asking for us whether we support the Tuesday meeting as one more step.
I don't think there's another, I think that's a monthly meeting, that mode meeting. I don't think they meet weekly. I think they meet monthly. And so I think what I'm hearing from council is the desire for staff to organize another meeting of the local businesses.
Oh, I see.
And I'm suggesting maybe that the consensus is, and I'm just trying to get clarity.
Point of order.
That maybe, I'll get to you in just a moment, that maybe the idea here is to get a staff's meeting that explains the recommendation more in depth of the contemporary lighting, and after giving that rationale, gets feedback from the members' businesses that are, or the businesses that are there, and that the council gets statistical data on what the consensus is if it's not to go with the staff recommendation. I do have a point of order, and I'll come back.
Can I have an opportunity to, I haven't even had an opportunity to explain. You haven't gotten input from every single council member before you went ahead with the next.
And I'm planning on coming to you, ma'am. I still see your light on. I'm just trying to get clarity on the two members that have chimed in on, exactly where they were going on that. Councilmember Russell. Please, I apologize. I didn't mean to, take consensus. I was just trying to get some clarity on what they were commenting.
I would like to go back and comment on the first question. I also am not disrespecting staff, and I never meant to do that, and I apologize if it was taken that way. I went because I wanted to find out, and the truth is, I did not do most of the talking at that meeting. A staff member was there, and when questions were asked, I just deferred to the staff member every time. I do agree with Councilmember Olson. I want to make certain that the business community feels that they have our buy-in, and I don't think that it would hurt to wait a little bit longer. One of the things about the style of the light, we could go ahead with everything. Even if we didn't choose the light fixture right now, we could do the wiring and everything, because every single light is going to have the same new wiring thing. So I would like to meet with the businesses, and I do believe the meetings are monthly. This whole thing, the study session, just happened to be just before their monthly meeting. I believe that we could go ahead and even wait, go ahead with everything, and then choose at the last minute after we've met with them. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Russell, I think what I'm hearing from you is you're saying that you would like them to present 4 different options and try to get some statistical feedback that can be brought forward to council at a later date?
Actually, I would just like to listen to what the businesses say. When we take our process down there to sell them what we think we want, we're not listening. We're presenting to them what we think we want. I think we should just go listen, and that's mostly what I did when I was there that day.
Thank you. Councilmember Barrington.
I just want to clarify, the city manager said earlier that you could have a meeting with the businesses, and I don't think any other council person made the comment other than myself about my concern the way the staff presented this, and I am concerned. I had 4 businesses show me their emails, show them to me to prove that they responded. We were told only 2 did, and when we have this kind of miscommunication for whatever reason it happens, it builds some distrust. And if we want to stick our heads in the sand and just, it's not a love fest for staff. If there is some miscommunication, then I want to make sure that that's brought forward, that that's a concern. But they physically showed them to me to say, hey, this is what I did. I did respond. I said, no, granted, those are only 4 that I talked to that said, hey, here's it on my phone, here's it going. And I go, okay. And that necessitated that there needed to be some more communication. I appreciate And problems happen, and you don't fix them by ignoring them. So I wanted to make sure that got brought forward. The offer that you made to just merely go ahead and offer to the businesses to bring that forward, I thought that was something that seemed to be that you could do that sooner than their next monthly meeting, if it's possible. And I wanted you to elaborate on that if you seem to have an idea on that, and I want to know whether we can go with that or not.
Thank you for the clarification. And again, Public Works indicated they got 2, and perhaps it was timing of when they submitted. I didn't go back to ask Dave Henderson when he received the others. But the idea of the meeting, yeah, I'm happy to have, see if we can arrange a meeting in the interim. We'll go down there again and try to grab as many of them as possible at the most convenient time. We do recognize that we're asking a lot of the business owners to come to another meeting when many of them are sole proprietors trying to run their shop, and I get that, and that's the difficult nature of it. But we're willing to try that, to do that, to make sure that we get as many folks on that block as possible present to that meeting. And yeah, we wanted nothing more too than to be able to listen and hear what they have to say, so we can gather that data and move forward one way or the other. And I think that also the recommendation brought forward by Councilperson Russell is absolutely correct. In the packet that you received before, we showed the locations where we would put the new poles. That electrical work needs to be done ahead of time. I think the main concern was being able to acquire the fixtures, because some of them are a long lead item, if you will, that takes time to get here. If we need to just cap the locations where the new poles would be or whatever they might be, we can do that. But I would like to also get with Public Works to make sure that's something that can be done. But it sounds like it's reasonable. I mean, we see this happen all the time, correct? Even with respect to the mid-block crossing, when we were waiting for 6 weeks actually it was more than 6 weeks. We waited 12 weeks for Excel to get out there and have their contractor put the light up. The foundation was there with the electrical, but not the pole for an extended period of time. So that's possible. Again, I think what we want to do as staff is to make sure that we hear council say, here's what we want you to do, go forth and conquer. And we'll make that happen anyway.
Thank you. Anything else, Councilmember Barentine?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Olson?
I heard one other thing tonight from the gentleman that was here, and that had to do with the block party. And I just totally forgot that when he was here. I wonder if we ought to also find a mechanism for getting feedback on that. The last thing I want for that not to go well either. And if they're a really dependent group for us to do that well, then...
Yeah, Councilor, Mr. Bestie, who you're talking about, yeah. Nathan Bestie, he is a part of the planning committee for that.
Right.
He has been a dynamo, quite frankly, with respect to his energy and trying to get and bring attention to that block of Broadway, the 3300 and 3400, where his shop is actually. Allison Carney will be back tomorrow, obviously, to work, and we can talk to her at that point in time to see if, in fact, her committee feels the same way. Her committee is comprised of merchants from that block, actually 2 blocks, actually even further, because Whiskey Biscuits owner is part of that as well. So we'll see if, in fact, they share that same concern. I definitely agree. That's one of the things that we brought up, I think, as staff, to say, listen, council, we can, if you heard Ms. Carney correctly, she said we can go now and have a small event, or wait and have a bigger event. And I think council said, let's go forth now. But I do appreciate the zeal that Mr. Bestie brings, because he's the kind of guy that when he does something, he does it 100%. And I think we don't want to have a shoddy event either. But it sounds like from the planning from the committee, and I get updated on a weekly basis about that this committee is very deeply concerned and has worked very diligently to ensure that this event's going to go off well. But I do appreciate his concern this evening, and that's something, again, we would want to get consensus from council on.
So just to follow up with that then, yeah, I am concerned because of the timing of it. I was at the time when we made that decision, but it seemed like we had our ducks in order. If we don't, I don't mind saying let's put it off, but I'd really want to hear from that group really well. But the last thing is having to do with this again. I would prefer to see us go ahead and not wait a month to get this group together again when they do it regularly, and go ahead within the next 2 weeks if it's possible for staff to pull something like that off, or 3 weeks. But again, if we have to wait a month, we do. How many people were at the meeting on Tuesday, Councilmember Russell?
There were 5 or 6.
Oh, okay, so it's not a huge group.
It's not, and
it's
I
like the
think
same folks probably.
Right.
Maybe a special meeting would then be in order, because then they might really come out for it if they know it's going to make a difference. Good, thanks, that's my input.
Thank you. I think I'm hearing kind of two different perspectives. One is, sharing our recommendation and explaining that rationale as to why that rationale came from staff. I'm hearing, I think, a competing thought of, hey, let's make a more open format and just hear feedback from them and what they'd like to see in a light, I think is what I'm hearing. And so maybe we can give some direction on that. Councilmember Rolson?
We could have a combination of the two. One would be to support the decision that we were going with and why with all of those pieces and say, no, we don't have to do it that way. We could have this or this. So then get their feedback. I think what I'm hearing, and I've heard this from businesses in the past, that sometimes when we present things, they hear it as if this is our decision, we're here to convince you of it. And I don't want to keep doing that.
Thank you. Councilmember Barrington?
Council hasn't made a decision. We had a presentation from staff, and so I don't think we really haven't decided yet. So if we could just show them the options, and anybody who wants to make a discussion of why staff was favoring one, that's fine. But I don't think it should be presented that any decision's been made, because it hasn't. It was done in study session. No decision's been made.
In my mind, this is an administrative function. This is not something that requires a vote of the council. I think, in my mind, the decision is truly the city manager's authority, and he's simply looking for guidance on this issue. And so in my mind, that decision kind of was made. It sounds like no harm, no foul. The order, haven't been ordered, and so it sounds like we're going to be able to go through this process, share some options, share some rationale as to why we recommended A, and get some feedback. Does that sound fair to everyone?
Yes.
Wasn't it being brought back to us to decide on?
It was not.
Which option?
No, ma'am. We decided on A, and we told the city manager to go forth and prosper, and it sounds like we got some feedback, and we want to slow that down, and I think that's just fine. Anybody have any different perspective on that? Mr. Keck, did you have a comment?
I was going to say, we will need to bring a contract back to the council for you to approve the pole and light fixture. So
fair enough. Thank you.
In my opinion, then, I guess what I'm answering you is just that, no, the only reason that I went with that was because I was led to believe that that's what the businesses wanted, so I want to hear what the businesses really want.
Thank you for that correction. I agree. The council will need to approve this size of a contract. Any further comments on the light pole issue?
Mayor Jefferson, we do have a motion on the floor from Councilmember Gillette with no second.
On the...
You made a motion.
Okay, you want to just withdraw that? I feel like we've got a game
forward
plan
on the
here,
light
Mayor Pro
poles.
Tem. Do you want to just withdraw that?
I'll withdraw.
Thank you. Any further comments from your member choice, Mayor Pro Tem?
That's all I have.
Thank you. Councilmember Yates? Thank you. Councilmember Rolson?
Nothing.
Thank you. Councilmember Barrington?
I attended the homeless seminar and with Downtown Inc., and they have just erected the tiny townhomes. I think it's at 38th and whatever downtown. It's getting some really mixed reviews. I mean, there are some concerns with this. It's an 8 by 12. It's up on cinder blocks. It's in a fenced, gated area, and with community kitchen and with. So while some people are saying that this might be a resolution to some of the homeless problem, other people are viewing it that we're putting homeless people in what looks to them like a little prison setting with community kitchen and this kind of volunteer work thing. So there are some pros and cons to it. Denver and Fort Collins are still kind of battling this through, but there are also some concerns about nonprofit church properties and that trying to use their property to put these on, and we may need to kind of look at this to deal with that issue. The Sterling Ranch issue with the budget, I asked for the contract on what Littleton did with Sterling Ranch on those 40,000 homes, and hopefully all of you had an opportunity to read this. I would like a little bit more information to come through on the joint meeting at the wastewater treatment plant. While I'm sure this will be an issue for the Littleton election because they are selling off their services cheaper to Sterling Ranch than they do for their own citizens. This is a total of $8 million a year. And if this was available, then I don't understand why we didn't go into it together. I get that they're selling off part of what they have available within their contract, but we're partners, and I don't know that we should be doing that without discussing it with Littleton or Littleton discussing it with us. And certainly the revenue that comes in from there, maybe that's why Littleton has $27 million in their reserves and we have less than $2 million. So I would like to explore a little bit more how this happens and what our obligation is for the water contracts and the regional plans that are going in, and maybe we can incorporate that into our operational agreements in the future. As to the budget, the start of all of this budget process has been very difficult. I am very dismayed to see this kind of being pushed to the line again. But the documentation that was given to us in the memorandum on the second page under the general fund makes no ifs, ands, or buts about the kind of problems that we're in, and that it says there are no amount of program elimination or budget cuts that will be able to sustain this level of effort in the future. And it claims that that this is the last possible year that we can go ahead and have a sustainable budget. I don't believe that the budgets that we've had, at least for the 2 years I've been on council, have been balanced or are sustainable. If we knew that this cliff was coming, and we did, it's been shouted from the mountaintops for the last 2 years and then taken back, is that we shouldn't, that we're overspending now. If we know that there's a problem coming and that next year, that after, that in 19 we can't sustain the budget, we need to be making corrections for this year and this budget and last year and that budget so that we could go ahead and be more responsible. I think statements like that are very concerning and should be a red flag to all of us to be very diligent in this process that we're going through. Not that budgets are very difficult, but it was during the budget process 10 years ago this year that Mayor Olga Wolfson passed away, and she passed away during quite honestly went into the hospital during a budget seminar, and I was hoping that maybe this council might have some I don't know, honor her service or just a little remembrance. It is the 10-year anniversary of her passing, and I think that that would be a nice thing to do. That's all I have.
Thank you. Councilmember Russell?
I actually attended a few National Night Out meetings, and that always, I guess I never knew about it before getting on council, and I really had a great time. And the interesting thing is the demographics on our block have changed dramatically. I think we have 4 or 5 young families now with little children, and there's a lot more energy on our block. And so one of the young ladies had a barbecue planned, and I realized it was during National Night Out, and so we kind of dovetailed into that, and it was just really, we had a great time last evening. But I just appreciate the city supporting the National Night Out, and I think it's a great thing. Just at the one thing I would like to share that I forgot to share before, at that business meeting, the energy that is created, and I think Nathan Bestie is one of the young men that is visionary, and I believe the Final Fridays has come as a result of those businesses getting together, and I just mostly sat there and listened, and I was amazed, and I think it is a good idea to listen. I'm glad that Councilmember Olson caught that, because I do think there is some concern that we're doing it too fast, and that I think there really are concerns on Broadway that it might be a little too quick. They're appreciative that the city wants to help, so I'm glad that Councilmember Olson brought that up, that we should bring that up also at the meeting. Also, in light of the budget, I just would like to know, I have a council request, could we get the compensation to directors in management over the past 3 years, raises, even to city employees? Because the truth is, my husband worked for the post office for 42 years. We would go sometimes 6 and 7 years with no raise, period. When the post office was in trouble, we got no compensation. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to Mayor's Choice, I just wanted to second what Councilmember Russell was saying there about National Night Out. I was able to attend, more than a handful of parties, and it really is a great testament to the community feel of all of our established residential neighborhoods that the community watch programs are so strong, get some of the neighbors together to know about some of the issues on the block. Just really appreciate the community building efforts happening there, and appreciate Councilmember Russell's efforts to get a new one started on Dartmouth Circle. I saw that there were several sort of newer parties this year, so it was great to see. This week I did want to highlight, hopefully Council all got the email regarding the cancellation of the Mile Table of Hope this Thursday that we had on our agendas for 11 a.m. On Thursday. That has been canceled. City Manager's Choice.
Mayor, the only thing we really wanted to get from Council tonight again is some concurrence on when the second true budget workshop would be. Obviously, we're going to be spending a lot of time next week at the study session on that. However, the 21st really is a full agenda before the regular council meeting. We'll have little time, I think, to discuss issues other than maybe just a little bit of feedback, as we're going to have the energy cost saving and sustainable initiatives presentation. This is where, again, staff's gone and calculated our current baseline greenhouse gas emissions percentage, or baseline for that. But we're not going to have enough time because that's before the business meeting. So the 28th, heretofore, has been scheduled as the Board and Commission Appreciation Night at River Run, and obviously that's was scheduled for 6 p.m., but we need another time to discuss budget with council that is qualitative, and I'm afraid that if we don't have that, we can't push into September due to the charter's requirement of scheduling the public hearing, and we are very concerned about that. We've already we had to we'll have to schedule that through the newspaper and everything else. So we're looking for another night sometime that week of the 28th to ensure that we get another good qualitative review for the budget. So,
Thank you. Did we get any feedback about potential dates regarding the email?
For the Board and Commission?
Yeah, has anybody suggested any dates or times regarding the budget retreat?
No.
Thank you. Does anybody have any suggested times? Councilmember Rolson?
I have a question about how long do we want this to be, and if it makes more sense to go back to the original plan and use the 28th for the budget meeting and then do another night for the celebrations.
I would say this. It's all going to be predicated upon how far we'll be able to get next week. Next week's agenda, we have CHAFA coming to discuss their mission and their role, and specifically the impact of affordable housing on communities. That was a request of council to do that, and we have two people coming for that right at 6. And then we have RTD parking matter that is on the agenda, and then the budget. So
it's a lot.
It's a lot. I think that we had anticipated at least a couple hours on budget, and CHAFA is probably about 45 minutes and that includes questions in their presentation.
So then how much more do you think we need?
Well, again, we have several programs we want to discuss, plus there is any other information that council may request and ask for that could extend the discussion. Because again, by the charter, we're required specifically with the calendar to make this happen.
I'd say at least 2 hours.
Probably another 2-3 hours.
So you think we should plan for 3 hours?
I think so, just to be safe.
Prefer to do it on the 28th then.
Again, the process that you all have requested, we kind of departed from our process from previous years, which really isn't a departure because it's dictated by charter. So, but we're allowing you, more opportunities for questioning and input, and we're trying to make sure that's a really good qualitative process. So,
well, I feel like we've had a lot of great presentations by you all over the years, so I'm feeling very good about where we are. I know it's a tight run at the end here,
sure,
which none of us wanted. But I'll go with whatever. We need 3 hours. I think we should be realistic about it.
Yeah, I think the suggestion of moving the 28th back to that, budget meeting and then finding another day for Board and Commission. Has Board and Commission been announced, I assume?
Good question.
Just like our block party, I think the cat's out of the bag.
Well, then maybe it doesn't work.
Do we maybe want to do do a special evening for it, like the 29th or something
29th.
for the meeting, because the budget thing is
suggestion of
is
the
pretty
29th.
important.
It's my wedding anniversary. I'll invite my husband.
Any other dates you want to suggest to save the anniversary night? I think we'll be sensitive to that if you wanted to suggest a different night. I have my community meeting on Wednesday, the 30th. Councilmember Barentine?
I do think that the 28th has already been put out there for people, so I think they have a right to be able to plan and schedule what they're doing if we're going to do some kind of activity around with them. When I was on council before, every single year we did a Saturday retreat, so I don't know why we can't, whenever everybody can meet, and I think it should be at least planned for 3 or 4 hours, and go ahead and get this done in a timely manner, because I don't think it looks good for anybody to think that we're rushing it. And I already do think that we're up against a wall again, and would like to see this loosened up a lot more next year. This is our job, and so whatever it takes to go ahead and make this happen, I think we need to do it.
How do you feel
So
about the
whenever
29th is okay, the evening works for you?
My schedule is really busy, but this is what I signed up. This is the job. This is the top 3 things we're supposed to do: the money, and hiring and firing and managing the city manager and city attorney. Those are our top priorities, and whatever it takes for that to happen.
Thank you. Councilmember Olson?
Yeah, it was.
Oh, excuse me. I believe it's actually Councilmember Yates, then Olson.
This question's for Linda. Did you say the 29th's your anniversary?
It is, but my husband would be fine to know that we worked out the budget.
Well,
we've commonly not celebrated the night
Would
of.
there be another date that might?
My birthday is the 14th. We're meeting that night too. So. Doesn't matter to me. I'm with Councilmember Barentine. I've always been here to serve the city and be here when we needed to be. I cannot always be here flipping around on Saturdays here and there. I won't be here on that Saturday before.
Would you prefer the 31st, perhaps?
31st works.
well, hold on here. I would be in favor, if we did a Saturday, if we started, like at 8 and just hammered it out and be out of there by noon.
I was thinking 6.
I'm fine with that. I'm
morning,
up
or?
at that time anyway, but.
Well, I can't be here that Saturday before the 28th. And that's fine. You can go ahead, the 6 of you. I could probably call in for some of it, though. But,
19th, maybe?
Well, Councilmember Russell may be awake at 6. I don't think we ought to do that to the staff. So
I really don't want to either.
8 to noon is usually what we did before.
So I'm hearing a suggestion of the 29th and the 19th.
I can't do the 19th. It's summer commencement. Sorry.
You were back to the 29th. Any other suggestions?
But I would call in. I can call in for some of it that Saturday if you can organize it like that.
The 29th, the Tuesday?
Yes, ma'am. I see a chamber business after hours at 5. I mean, in my mind, we could do a 6 to 8:30 kind of thing. P&Z meets that night as well, I
can do it.
believe. Although it is the 1, 2, 3, 4. It is the 5th Monday, right? Or 5th Tuesday. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, so I'm not sure if P&Z really meets that.
Not meet that night.
Yeah, okay. Anybody else want to suggest a different day besides the 29th at 6 p.m.?
Is there anybody else who could not do the 29th?
Doesn't sound
So
like
I'll make it work.
There's always.
I mean, Amy might not be able to do it.
Is there anything on the 22nd? You have obligations on the 22nd?
BAC's 22nd at 5:10, but 6 o'clock start. In my mind, we could kind of do both. Or 5:15, I think it is. I think I put it in 5 minutes early.
Although, this thing's going to be 3 to 4 hours. That's fine.
I can do the 22nd
Nothing new.
as well.
You can do the 22nd as well. Does anybody have any preference between the 22nd or the 29th?
22nd.
Okay.
I prefer the 22nd, but I can do
Okay.
either.
Sounds like a preference for the 22nd. Are you guys both available on the 22nd as well? Everybody?
Maybe like 5:30?
Last call on the 22nd. I'd prefer a 6 so that I could attend as much of BAC as I could.
I got to be there too, so.
Oh, you're doing the presentation that night, huh?
Oh, okay. So let's make it 6.
Okay.
Maybe BAC should be there. Right?
It sounds like they might want to come on down
Good
after the meeting kind of ends.
6 to 9.
Yes, we'll pencil it in for 6 to 9, Tuesday the 22nd. Please put that in your calendars.
Can you have a request sent out in our calendars?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was city manager. Anything else, sir?
No, sir, thank you.
Thank you. City Attorney's choice?
Nothing this evening.
Thank you. And with that, we are hereby adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
All right, just a minute.